Just to introduce the panel to you now. First here on my left is Richard Rogers. Richard is CEO of Voxking and co-founder of Nearform. Stephen Blair, I'm sure many of you know, is the boss of the Southern Regional Assembly. And whilst we're talking about a national planning framework, that's what it is, it's a framework. We now have to put the meat on those bones, and Stephen and his people will be the ones really to take in what we're saying, interpret it and put that plan together. So a hugely important role there, and it's very important that we make the best use of those opportunities. Michael Welch, you know, of course, our city and county CEO. Next to him, Louise Grubb. Louise is founder of Q1 Scientific and CEO, and previously founder of NutriScience. And of course we have Tom O'Keefe, leader of Ernst & Young in Waterford. And as I said, thank you again for sponsoring this event this morning. So I suppose based on what we've heard, I'd like to throw it to the panel. The challenge seems to be that we need to have a vision of where we're going and to work towards that. Are we ready to reset the dial at this stage? Maybe Louise, if I could start with you. Ladies first.
I suppose I'm looking at the sort of life sciences area, so the pharmaceutical medical device area in the in the region around us. I think we are progressing so much. We do have a cluster of pharmaceutical medical device companies, and that cluster is really important because if we want to attract graduates and experienced scientists, engineers, etc. to the region, it's important that they have a career choice. So if there's only one or two companies that they can work in, you know, it limits. Whereas if they feel, look, there's a lot of, I will have a lot of options if this doesn't work out for me, and that's where the broader region is very important to attract talent in, so that they have options and that they can look, if they move outside Dublin, well, look, I have quite a few different options here where I can still be half an hour from home and not have to have the commute of Dublin. But what is also critical, and it's come across whenever you're trying to recruit people, the city is very important. A vibrant city that in that region is very important. It's where people want to go for. It may be the university for college, but also for the social experiences, you know, the theatre, and we do need a critical mass. You know, we do need a vibrant city. Obviously there's the tourist part of it, but just from my own point of view of attracting people in, getting them to work in the region, I think those two things are important. So I do think that the city view, you know, actually building up the city and the brand of the city and how important it is to us is really, and that's something that companies can do, because we're all out branding our own companies. If we have a consistent image of what Waterford is and where it's going in the future, I think we can help build that brand as we are, you know, promoting the area.
Okay, thank you, Louise. Richard, maybe I might just put it to you. You certainly in your time have been very anxious to build businesses that need brains, need talent. Have we got it? Are we doing enough? Or in this vision of the future, more importantly, what do you see us as needing to do in that area?
We don't have enough. We don't have enough talent. But we can't let that stop us either. I mean, the way that I've addressed that in my own businesses is to bring together the talent that is here with talent all around the world. And that is the only viable strategy, especially in tech. You can't have a strategy where you want to bring everybody who's going to work in your company to Waterford. That just isn't going to work. And maybe in 20 years' time, if we get the high density living and all that, at that stage, that will be a viable strategy. But we've got to play with the deck of cards that we have. And that then leads into the questions of how we look at our transport infrastructure. I think that the discussion about cars is particularly important. I would say that pretty much everybody in this room owns at least one car. I would say that most of you probably own two cars, especially if you have children. We need to think about what is going to happen to cars in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Because right now, if somebody says to you, you won't own a car, you feel in your gut, that's crazy. Cars are such a symbol of success in this country. But the economic reality of self-driving cars, and they are coming, is going to change that equation. It won't make sense to own a car. What will make sense is to take out your smartphone. You're sitting in your house, you take out your smartphone and you order a car, and it comes and takes you wherever you want to go. And if you've used Uber in major European cities, okay, at the moment a person comes. But in 10 years' time, the car will come itself. And that changes the equation about how we design cities, because we don't need to design them for cars anymore. And I think that's one of the factors that we need to bring into the planning, because we are planning for 20 years. And if we're not asking the question about the technical changes that will happen, if we're still thinking in the mode of we need motorways because people need to commute, because people will be driving themselves, because it takes 2 hours of your working day, in a way that's a 20th century question, and we need to be asking 21st century questions about what we do with transport infrastructure.
Thank you very much, Richard. Michael, I suppose on the one hand, people generally would hear and learn about Waterford as the Viking city, the oldest city in Ireland. On the other hand, Louise and Richard looking forward about a vibrant city for the next generation and so on. Is that a contradiction in terms, or can we marry both?
No, I don't think it's a contradiction in terms. I think you have to respect the strengths you have. Heritage is one of the strengths we have. The heritage isn't even about that. I think it's part of the journey about developing pride in yourself in some respects, because it's the identity, it's the essence of the place, is the way I'd put it. And I think it talks to a story. It is the story of urban formation, in fact, because 1100 years ago the Vikings rocked up, and we've been growing since then. We're now 50,000, 800,000 people really, because that wider 10-mile area. We're too distributed in that 10-mile area, to take John's point. But like, you've rocked up, and we're certainly in a place where we have decisions to make around how we promote ourselves, the messaging that we sell. And that's deriving from the opportunities that I think we've given ourselves collectively. And it's a phenomenal opportunity in some respects, because, like, just to go back, and it's not to harp on sort of formation, but the reality is you've grown, and this is somewhat consistent with the other cities, is you've grown, at a relatively slow rate in the grand scheme of things. 1100 years to get to 50 or 100,000 population isn't exactly rocking. Mind you, in the last 40 or 50 years, that has become 1% per annum on the average, fairly straightforward. In our regional cities, Galway surpassed that. And but really, we're entering another phase now where urbanisation, the agrarian mentality that would have driven the relationship with the land and the 1 acre site and everything is changing. I don't see that in my kids, for example. In fact, I have a couple of them, and they hate the sight of a lawnmower. So there's a societal change there in terms of urbanisation, in terms of other things. So you're going to go from this growth rate, for certain, that is 1%, to something that is significantly more, and that's even being further reinforced now by policy decisions at national level, which is the National Planning Framework. So it's a phenomenal opportunity, really, to manage what is that change that's going to come anyway, and to maximise the potential of it. So I think in terms of, you asked the question around the historic thing, we have to find the messaging that describes where we want to be. We have to paint the vision without losing the identity piece, because the identity and the nature of your city is the essence of it. So I see it as a massive opportunity and massively challenging. I do take John's points. We do have decisions in Waterford to make. I have no illusion around that. The situation here is, I'd say you have 3 choices actually. You have a choice of being in the wider sort of conglomeration of cities that John was talking about somehow, forming that and getting involved to have the debate and structure around that. And the other 2 choices might neither be really palatable. You have a choice of being a satellite of Cork or a satellite of Dublin. Or try to be an independent entity outside of that, and I'm not sure you can be. I'll park it at that because it's,
Thank you, Mike.
John is trying to provoke thought as much as anything,
Sure.
so that should in its own way too.
Thank you. And I'm going to go to the audience briefly now. Just Tom, maybe John alluded to the EY experience. You moved, if you like, into the city. You might just summarise what's happened in terms of your growth and what your take on the plan is.
Yeah, so I mean, most people probably know we were out in Newtown previously. We moved into town beside the People's Park about 3 years ago. We had about 45 people at the time. We're now up on 85 and taking another floor in Maritana Gate. And you know, it's interesting. We were talking last night about, you know, I suppose we hire mainly millennials, right? I suppose they would be the significant population of that additional growth. And we are seeing some shifts. So I suppose previously a lot of those people would have lived in the suburbs rather than in the city centre. And we are seeing that shifting. It's not quite going right into the city centre yet. It's probably going more towards Ardkeen and Dunmore Road. But it certainly is coming closer. And we do see that point that John is referring to in terms of, you know, younger people you know, wanting to have that interaction and amenity in the city rather than being out in the suburbs.
Okay, thank you, Tom. So just before I open to the audience, maybe Stephen, what do you want to hear? That's not putting you too much on the spot, given that you're the guy that's going to have to write the gospel.
Thanks, Paul. I think what you've read in the papers and heard on television and so on about the National Planning Framework, there are two things I want to say before I get into answer the question. One is, you'll have been aware of the intensive lobbying that went on behind the scenes in the last month. And in fairness, the government did hold firm. But there is, as John spoke about, this tradition of a much more rural agrarian society and the powerful forces in the political spectrum. So we have to design now a response to the National Planning Framework, building on what's in the framework, but putting much more detail on it. What's very, very encouraging, and I want to stress this, is for the first time ever, and it's amazing that it's taken this long, is to have full integration between our investment plans and our planning framework. But what's really encouraging, and is a sign the government is really taking this seriously, is that over 4 billion euros of investment over the next 10 years is not predetermined and will not be determined by the centre. It will be determined by the quality of projects that will come forward by the regions, by the cities, by the localities, and by the strength of the cooperation and partnership that will operate at the city level. So there is a €2 billion investment fund for cities and towns that has never been there before. We've had trickle, urban and village renewal, a few 5 million here, 10 million there. We're talking about hundreds of millions potentially that Waterford can bid for. And it will be successful if the quality of what you bring forward here in Waterford is at the top end. So I'm saying to you, be ambitious with your ideas for the city, because there will be backing for those ambitions. A lot of what we do in the public sector is all about now trying to ensure that the necessary environment for investment will take place. A lot of that is to do with the physical infrastructure and so on, and of course Waterford, there are constraints and gaps and so on, and they are more easily identified. So we're working with Irish Water, Transport Infrastructure Ireland and so on. But what else is needed to drive Waterford for the vision that people have been speaking about? Where are the human capital gaps? Where are the venture capital gaps? Where are the idea gaps? What is unique in Waterford that perhaps the other regional cities don't have? For Waterford to double its population, it's not going to happen by you and the audience, by natural increase. We're not all going to be propagating 6 children now that we're told Waterford has to double its population. It will only grow if people choose to come to Waterford to live and invest in. So what is it that Waterford can do to make it attractive, that people want to come here, that want to invest here? That's what we want to hear about. So over the next few months, we will be devising a regional economic and spatial strategy to deliver on the economic policy of government and the National Planning Framework. So we really do want to hear your views on what it is that Waterford can do over the next 10 years that will make it the destination where people want to be.
Maybe just at this stage, Louise, talking ourselves up and injecting a bit more confidence. Are we short in your view?
I don't know that we are. I was involved last year in the EY Entrepreneur of the Year Awards, which gave me an opportunity, great profile. But and it was a great opportunity to talk up Waterford. But I get a lot of questions. Why did you start the business in Waterford? So I think a little bit we need to define who we are so that it's a consistent message. So if I'm talking about, whenever I get the opportunity to talk about it, I do think it's important that we define who we are, define what we would like to achieve so that there is a consistent message going out there. I think with what John is saying in terms of having that sort of association in a particular spatial arrangement, if that's a potential for us, let's decide upon it as a city. But I do think we should talk ourselves up. I think we should. I don't think we do enough of it. I think the messages often that come out of the city, unfortunately, can be quite negative. But we have a lot of very positive stories, and we really need to push on with that and get everyone on the same page so that they're using the same materials, if you like, to promote the city and the region.
And presumably talking ourselves up is all the more important if we can clarify the vision and where we want to go. I suppose, Stephen, maybe just one to you. I was certainly very cognizant of the fact that when all the talk was on about the intro of the NPF and it was to be December, then January, and people began to get windy, is it coming at all? On most national media outlets, the constant was, Cork, Limerick, Galway and Waterford was hardly mentioned, and at the same time there was hardly anyone from Waterford strongly in the media making the point. Now, that's not a criticism. I think I know the answer to that. You've got to do it for yourself. But how important is that in terms of getting the confidence going in the first place?
Yeah, no, there's been a few comments from the audience about this issue of branding and so on, and the strength of the Waterford brand. There is no doubt that Waterford has not been as strong in the national consciousness as some other cities, as the other cities. Certainly the key people who've been involved in the National Planning Framework are acutely aware of the importance of Waterford. So I don't think there's an issue there. But it does come back again to what I said earlier about the ambition for Waterford. And the Chief Executive of Waterford Council made that point in terms of where does Waterford see itself going. Like, this part of the country is unique. In the southern region that I work for, it's the only region that has 3 cities. Every other region has a single city. So what are the things that could be done collaboratively that all 3 cities would benefit from? We're not good at that space. Other countries do it very well. Cities collaborate. Of course there's competition, but there's also collaboration. As John said to an industrialist from China, the size of the country is so small, never mind the distance between Cork, Limerick and Waterford. But there are connectivity issues, both digital and transport connectivities that have to be addressed and will be addressed. But if those issues were put to bed, what is it that Waterford, Cork and Limerick together can do that they can't do individually? We don't hear that being spoken about in the public.
Okay. John, would you
Yeah, and I think, I mean, look, a lot of issues have been raised, and I'm delighted to hear that, because actually I do think that question of what is Waterford's brand, I mean, is really important. And as I've learned more about Waterford, and I think one of the big points I wanted to make is just assume most people aren't talking about you, right? So actually, all the bad stuff you see yourself, most people aren't talking about that either. And that was one of the big messages that we had to get over in Limerick, is everybody was assessing in Limerick, and the Rubber Bandits taught us how to make a bit of a joke out of that. And I think the thing about art and culture is absolutely key in terms of divisioning the city. But the pack will raise some of the core questions for me, right, if you go down that. Because I would still maintain that the most powerful pack we can have is a single pack, for whether it's 3 cities in the Southern Regional Assembly, whether it includes Galway as well, and that Waterford, as indeed Limerick and others, is one of those pull-out options. It's like 4 different slides into it, but actually the total pack is the total combined entity, and that's the one I would love to write, right? And then actually what happens is that each of those 4 cities, although competing against each other, are actually competing against each other on a much more equal footing. Today what I see each of those 4 cities doing is they're trying to compete with Dublin, and they lose the battle every time. And so Waterford actually becomes a choice of sort of whether it's the mountains and the beach. It takes a lot longer to get to the beach from Limerick, right? And therefore that's the strength. And I think that pack, if only one thing came out of this today, which is how do we do, Stephen's help, how do we do the big pack for the 4 cities and decide whether Cork want to be one of them, and if not, the 3 can do it. And then what does Waterford's individual pull-out sheet look like in that pack? And how does it draw on the strength of the other cities in defining that?
And can I thank you? Could I just say, I think that the idea of the show of hands, by the way, on which of the choices, we might just leave that till the end, because it could be an interesting conclusion.
No, because I have 4 siblings, so it's kind of easy for me to think about this. I'm the oldest, right? So my 3 siblings probably think I got everything. We didn't all get the same things. Right? As opportunities as kids, we got different opportunities depending on our own strengths. But what I think is important is that if we're 4 in the family, the current big boy, which is Cork, right, is somewhat disciplined in what they can ask for by the other 3. When the other 3 are saying, no, actually you can't have it, you could give every one of the 4 cities an equal vote when they actually talk to Stephen about stuff, right? But what they get will not be the same, because they don't need the same in terms of sort of the structure. And that's where I think it gets really interesting, is if the 4 are actually coming to the table and deciding how they spread their resources out between each other, and then going to Dublin and saying, this is what we'd like.
I'm just looking up at the screen here and see Waterford's 2040 vision, and that's what today is about, how we view Waterford in 2040. For me, Waterford in 2040, it's all about jobs. It's about a population increase of at least 30,000 people. And as someone said here, that's not going to happen naturally. We have to encourage people to come into Waterford. And the branding of Waterford, whatever it is, it should reflect what we have been in Waterford to entice people to come to Waterford, be it the lifestyle or whatever, or the heritage. But we have to think about that what it means to live in Waterford. That is what brand Waterford is. The other area, and I pick up with what John has said, and for me it's a little bit worrying when you hear of the Atlantic Corridor and the potential of the Atlantic Corridor as a force going forward up to 2040 in attracting foreign direct investment into Ireland. As you said, John, you have an area with Galway, Limerick, Cork, 3 universities. You have all the attractions along the west coast now being promoted as well. And the question, I suppose, that I have to you is that if the N24 isn't developed and Cork get their way with the N20 up through Mallow, do you feel that Waterford still has an opportunity to joining up with that western corridor. Because from talking to people in Cork who are promoting the N20 to Limerick and Galway and beyond, eventually what they would like to see is that motorway running down through Dungarvan into Waterford. And I've actually been asked, will I support that route? Now, my worry there is that if that happens, Waterford will be a feeder to Cork, a feeder to Dublin, and Waterford won't be given the opportunity to reach its full potential. And I suppose the question is, without the N24, are we on our own? Right.
Okay. The answer to that is I think about the plan that's come out. It's a 20-year plan, or actually a little bit longer, with a 10-year funding. So the first part of it is only 10 years. So in theory, if there's plenty of money in there, you could have an M24 and an M20, right? And at some stage, you probably would have. My argument in favour of the M24 was that if you only had to pick one, I thought it was a more efficient use of resources to do that and connect up all 4 cities with one motorway. And it goes back, I think, to the core question sort of here, which is, does Waterford want to be, and I guess we'll hear that answer in a minute, right? It feels like X Factor or something like that that's going to be voted on. Right? Does Waterford want to be part of that family? And if it does, I'm not sure that the M20, M24 debate is entirely finished yet, because I think there's still probably some former colleagues of mine who will, if they were given a choice, or 2 or 3 choices, some of which they've never had, but somebody mentioned at the back they've never seen this other alternative, right? It's only been sort of talked about it in rather small groupings, and the lobby that is the M20 lobby was at this for the last 4 or 5 years, right? So they've been well oiled. I think that debate should still happen. But even if it did happen in favour of the M20, I wouldn't mean to me that you then finish the debate there. If Waterford says we want to be part of this Galway family, they should be strongly advocating for the road that might otherwise connect Waterford up to the rest to go further north than the Dungarvan road. So your support that's been solicited, you'd be saying, no, actually we want to put the money into the M24 because we get more bang for our buck that way than having to get to Galway via Cork. Right, so the debate moves on from the M20 to the M24 to the Dungarvan road to the M24. I don't think it means that necessarily the M24 is dead. And I, for all the reasons I've espoused, think that that's just much more efficient because it lines up to the railway networks and everything else, and it just creates it. But the first choice is the question about what Waterford wants to do. Because if it doesn't want that, and it wants to have any one of these other spectres that you have there, we don't know the answer to that question, so we don't know what infrastructure.
I would say, John, that unless the N24 happens, it'll be very difficult for Waterford to make that choice.
And I think Limerick could be brought around. I think Galway.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
No, I'm not arguing. But what I would say is this: like the rationale that would be the Cork rationale to say make it via Dungarvan. Well, it'd be a lot easier to go to Galway via Dublin, to be honest about it. Do you know, even with a motorway into the future, because, jeez, why would you?
No, and you're very lucky.
Same thing. You
The guy with in many ways the pen to either suggest a study, suggest a comparative decision is in Waterford sitting on my right hand side, right? But you probably need decision. The one thing I just want to say, because I know you want to finish up, but it goes back to the heritage and Gaul and the cities. And why did I originally pick the 4 cities rather than greenfield sites? And this is really the strength of places like Waterford. If any of you have ever sort of lived in a new house or lived in an old house, you'll know exactly what I'm about to say, right? when you sit in the dining room of an old house, you are left thinking about all of the people who have been in that dining room for centuries before, right? And that's an incredibly powerful emotion, an emotional attachment that you can have to a place, right? That is the strength the places like Waterford have. Even sitting in this room today, you're imagining all the performances that have happened, but more so when you walk out into the street. That is irreplaceable. You cannot rebuild that in a new development. And that's where the downtown areas of cities all across the world, that's why they're the premium locations, not the new suburbs, right? And Limerick and Waterford share the same strength, but actually in many ways the same weaknesses, that our downtown areas have been become the place that people don't want to be. And it has to be part of your solution. And it has to be built on that heritage and culture and a whole lot in terms of making the downtown. And that's why I do think that the comment that was made about your city manager and the people here, you have done a great job in terms of the public realm, but you could do even much more again. And it's just put that ambition level up there and go for it. I went to Care, right, for a different reason, which is just right beside Limerick Junction. Now, I mean, Galway, the lads from Cork have to go a bit further, so that upsets them. They would prefer the left-hand turn to be a Mitchelstown, because that's still in the Cork border, and they get Cork jerseys, right? But I suggest to Care, I don't really care which one, right? I think the strongest lobby at the moment for the M20 is actually Mallow and Charleville, right? And they're the ones that, there's no counterforce to that.
First of all, I'd just at this stage like to acknowledge our Mayor, who's arrived obviously to just get a little bit of feel as to what we're talking about. And I suppose the best way to summarise it, I think, is that we hopefully now are more acutely aware, A, as Stephen says, there is a huge pot there to do the right things for this city and this region. What we need collectively is the shared vision as to what that is. And that seems to me, listen to this morning, is about acknowledging the heritage, the history, the points that will make us our own unique selling points, our attractiveness. But then it's a question of where do we fit that piece of the jigsaw in. So to finish, as we promised, I'd ask for a show of hands on 3 propositions. One is we stay as the South East and let everything revolve around Waterford. The second one is to join the fulcrum that we've spoken about from Galway, Limerick, Cork and Waterford to play its role as an axis to Dublin. And the third one is to be a satellite to Dublin. So if I started with the satellite to Dublin, many people would be in the room would feel that that is the way to go. The South East working a one-to-one with Dublin. Very good, 0. Okay, so the second one then is, I suppose, for the South East to stay as its own entity. Interesting. Small show, okay. And then the last one, obviously, which seems to be the winner, is this fulcrum, this axis to Dublin, the 4 cities, 4 sisters. Okay, so that's interesting, and thank you for that. I think that gives us the basis, hopefully, to go forward. As I said, in Chamber, we are there to represent you, but we can't do it unless you tell us what you want. You know that under Gerald's stewardship, we have introduced panels, so we have retail, tourism and so on. Please, if you don't know about them, look them up on the website, get involved, because the messaging needs to start formulating. And Stephen, if I leave the final word with you, can you just give us a timeline in terms of what you need in terms of feedback for us to get wherever we want to get to?
Well, look, the draft of the Regional Economic and Spatial Strategy is going to be prepared by the summer. So the next 3 months is when all the heavy work is going to be done. So there will be a formal consultation process, but I'll be much happier to take any material as you produce it. Okay, so the work starts here, guys. That's the news. So listen, can I just wrap up and say to you, to Ernst & Young, EY, sorry, it's the old habit. Thank you very much for sponsoring this event this morning. We appreciate it. Thank you for turning out in such large numbers, and hopefully leave the room mobilised and realise that we all have a shared job of work to do. There's no point in us blaming anybody else in 2-3 years' time. It's from now we need this work done. Thank you very much for your attention.